center. Yeah, move your finger for me to put it there.
Yeah, kind of get it set.
Go for it. Well, so, ready? You get it?
I think so.
Barely. So what? I must not got it. Well, we're officially starting our off season. We, as you can see behind me here, we have our new to us car. She ain't really much to look at. Didn't really have a chance to get her cleaned up once we got it from the previous owner, and the weather and all that. We just didn't have a chance to get her cleaned up. This is a 2016 Skyrocket, so we're moving up 2 years from our 2014. So this is kind of roughly how we got it. I have torn it down a little bit, and as you've seen in my intro, we had to add some brackets to make this a sport mod. It had some of them, but not all of them, so we had to add that one there too. Those are weight jackers for the rear ends, so something we have to have. We don't get by with not having them for the rules. So most of our parts are going to transfer over. There's a few things: steering box, upper A arms. We did get the fuel cell with this car, so we will not have to transfer that stuff over. But engine tranny, mid plate, all that stuff's coming over, so it'll be pretty quick transition once we get some body panels and get that squared away. Just kind of starting the season off. I'm over here working and struggling with wheel bearings, changing out the wheel bearings. They were getting a little rough. It's kind of hard to see there with the grease, but like this one here, there's a little bit of pitting down in there, just starting to go bad. So this side wasn't too bad, which is the side that sees most stress, so that's good. But here, I already got the left side put on and installed. That side, the bearings were pretty shot. The races were almost rippled a little bit, so we got that fixed, and we're gonna keep chugging. So oh, I got to show you my new toy for this year. So last year we got a pit bike to help us get around. Now this year we found us a four-wheeler. So I'm not for sure if I'll be able to push the car if I need to with that, but it's got some racks and a little box in the back that can be taken off. Right now it's just holding the rear end. So bought it real cheap, fixed it up. So it's going to be hopefully something that'll fit in our trailer that we can take to the races with us. So when we're hauling people around or hauling equipment or whatnot, we can actually take more than just the person driving. So that'll be fun. So we're working on getting that fixed and running. It does run and drives right now. It's a little temperamental in the cold, which hopefully when race season comes around, cross fingers, that ain't gonna be -4 like it is today. But yeah, so we'll get that baby all tuned up, ready to rock and roll for the season. And I suppose before it gets too late, I better get back to get my bearings put in. Don't make fun of my hammer. I don't know where all my other hammers are. I'm not even sure where I got this little guy at. Use the old race to get her started in there. Try to smash my fingers. Once I get her shoved in there, I like to use the air hammer just to finish her off. Sound different. Oops. She's all the way down in there. Otherwise you'll touch that up a little bit. Got in there a little deep. And if I could afford it, I had to replace all these parts, but unfortunately. What? Oh, I got it. Had a brain fart for a second. Was kind of wondering why my arms aren't hitting the frame, but I know everything's loose. But it's actually the ball joint bottoms out. I hope that's on purpose. So I just usually mount the spindle up so I got a little extra support. And if anyone's ever pissed around with these things before, they're wheel bearing spacer. I don't know. I'm on the fence if I like them or not. They in theory seem like a really good idea, but I don't know. They seem like a little bit more of a hassle than kind of what they're worth. But if the good guys run it, I gotta run it. I forgot. I want to seat the bearings first. Make sure the races are all seated square. Good. So basically what I'm doing is I'm putting all the bearings in there dry. And what I'll do is I'll tighten it down to a, we'll call it a set torque. Just to make sure that the bearings are seated square and concentric to the spindle. Roll it a few times just to make sure everything's good and seated. Now, if you were setting your bearings without the spacers, you know, you'd still do this process, and then you'd set your backlash, basically your preload, so that your bearings spin to how you want them, and you know, you'd set them kind of like that. Whereas with these wheel spacers, you got to you're basically setting the distance between the inner and the outer bearing, so that they're not actually, they set your preload space, gap, free play, however you want to call it, by the spacer, and then it's not actually burying into the cup so tight, so you get a little bit better free spin on it. This is the theory, I think. So there's probably a more scientific method to this, and I feel like an idiot not trying to find it, but basically put all this stuff in dry, no seal, no grease. So basically you put it in all dry, so I don't have any grease in there. I have no seals or nothing in the back. And you'd set this, and now that the spacer's in there, in theory you should be able to tighten this pretty snug, and your bearings are spaced properly. Now that to me is a little bit stiff, so, and then you want to do it so that way when you try and rock here, I'm doing this one-handed, when you try and rock this rotor, you don't have any free play, slack, I don't know, gap, I don't know what you want to call it. But I think on these bearings, if I remember right, you're supposed to have maybe up to 1,000 or 2,000ths max of slop, so basically free play in the rotor. So this is where it becomes kind of a pain. So basically this is an adjustment set screw, and you open it to loosen it up. So I'm going to go right about there. I think there isn't really a set marker for it. I have had it marked in the past where I thought it was. Sometimes you got to adjust it. Put all your stuff back in here. Again, it's all dry. Don't put any grease in it, because that kind of screws with your readings when you're setting this initially. So I'm getting closer. You can see as I spin it, it does keep spinning for a little bit, but you kind of want it to have just on the borderline of having some slop in it. So again, we take it apart, and this is where it gets kind of frustrating. You go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Loosen the set screw, adjust it just the tiniest amount. can't remember. I think these had a spec on them where it's so many turns, kind of like thread pitch, so you can kind of gauge that way a little bit, but it's kind of tough because you're going off a almost like an angular rock. So obviously if you're measuring out here and you get a thou, you may only be getting like a quarter thou down at the hub. So where you go and then translating that into a horizontal movement, the space, to adjust that spacer. So I just like to go by feel. I could be completely wrong, but I haven't had fail yet. Again, you just put it all back together dry, which is nice. You're not pissing around with having grease everywhere. Your hands aren't greasy. You know, you have to worry about grease on the floor, your clothes, all that good stuff. So, and then I don't like to go overly tight, but just tight enough to where, see how that free spins? You know, it's probably done 6-7 revolutions just in a little spin. And the nice thing is, you know, like when you tighten it, you don't necessarily have to like back it off and find that nearest castle nut. You're kind of adjusting in between it, and so to me like that, I can't feel any end play. And if I had to, I could get my dial caliper out and try and measure it, but to me that feels good. It's tight, free rolls like that. You know, that's what you want. That's the rolling resistance you're trying to get rid of by running these spacers. So, and then the theory is too, like when you're in the corner and you got pressure on this, it's still just as easy to move. So as I'm trying to press on this, it's still, you can see it's still really easy to move. So, and we haven't even put grease in it yet, which is crazy. I'll show you, when you put grease in them, they kind of get sticky, but I'm assuming that's just because the grease needs to get kind of worn in and layered down to the right film on all the moving components. So, and you will, like after like the first night, it'll go from being kind of sticky with the grease to then it'll start getting to where you can kind of do this and it'll free spin again. So another little trick that I like to use, hold on, is to make sure these don't adjust on you, get sloppy. I'll take the set screw out and just take a little bit of, I have it right here in my drawer. It's just medium strength Permatex. I use the gel just so it's not running all over, and then I just run a little bit on the threads there, and we'll slap it in the adjuster and try not to move it, and it just helps hold it in place. And then these are pretty fragile parts, small. I think I'm only using like a 3/32 Allens, so it don't take much, just a slight pressure, and away you go. And again, you can see that was where I've had it marked in the past, from there to there. So they do adjust, or they do change from different wheel bearings to wheel bearings, and I don't know if from there to there you've a couple thou on this spacer or not. So, but yeah. And here's kind of the fun part that I'm cheap, so they do recommend with using those spacers, you can get the fancy bearings that are like rim polished for added free roll, less resistance. And then they have a fancy grease that they use that comes in like a syringe. It's very expensive. I just use my normal grease gun. I like the Lucas, like red and tacky. Is kind of my grease that I've gone to. And the nice thing with using this needler is like it just hooks right on the end of your grease gun, your hose. And then I know like a lot of people claim that, you know, like the extra grease that you pack in there is waste and it's like more resistance and all that, but I don't want a bearing to fail, so I kind of lean a little bit more old school. And so like I'll put the needler in here and I just pump it, about 1 pump per, which is not much considering it's just a tiny little like hypodermic needle. The smaller bearing here, like I always go from what I call the bottom, the small side. It seems like it fills a lot easier. Fill it until it comes out the bottom or the sides. Just fill in between each roller. And sometimes you gotta wiggle it a little bit and go up and down. I mean, that's what I do. Do I think these need to be packed like they do in the old school days? Probably not. I'm kind of doing an in-between hybrid method. And it's just kind of, it's not wild, but you know, you can see there's grease oozing out. So when you go to put bearings in with these spacers, I've done this before and it can be a pain. Make sure you put your spacer in first, because it does not go in the other way. And you can't put it in after. And then your big bearing. This is the back of the hub. So you put your big bearing in there. And then I like to use, it's the part number. It's a flange seal out of like an 89, for these metric rotors. It's like out of an 85 Monte Carlo. Oh no. Probably help if I had the right hammer instead of the little tiny claw hammer. But and then this is just my extra little touch. I know you can buy the fancy Teflon seals and low resistance seals and whatnot, but I just like to make sure that it lubricates it, but just helps keep out some of the extra dust. As I like to put a little grease, careful if you're using your needle, but just a little grease on the seal, just so it slides better and rotates better on the shaft there, the spindle shaft. So just kind of helps keep that seal from being damaged when you install it, and also when you rotate it, just gives it a little bit of a slick surface. May not do nothing at all. That's just my theory behind it. So, and basically once you get the hub on there with the seal and the rear bearing and the spacer's in there. And again, you will not be able to slide that in from the outside, so make sure you put that in before you put your bearings in for that final time. But make sure you've set all your spacer lengths and that kind of stuff ahead of time with it dry. That is the key portion. If you don't do it dry, you will not get it set right. Basically, we go back through. This should be our final assembly. Just tightening this down back to our original, and you can see with the grease and the seal in there, it does not spin super freely right now because it's all trying to get moved around and packed in and lubricating all the surfaces in there, all the rollers. So, and of course it's only like 50 degrees in here, so the grease is a little thicker. You know, once it gets in the dead of summer and whatnot, it'll loosen up. And remember that gap we set, some of that grease is going to fill in that gap. So that's just my little tech tip anyway. One other little thing I would say when putting these together from my experience is when you're bending over your cotter pins, if you have the ability to, I would recommend putting your cotter pins in from the bottom. Because like for me, I'm in no hurry right now of getting this done. I can take my time. I have all the right tools in front of me. I have perfect lighting. If you ever have to take these apart at the racetrack, it is so much easier if it's right on top, because this is probably gonna be lower to the ground. You know, if you're just on a jack or a jack stand. So if you can keep this at the top, so when you're absolutely needing to take these apart, you have them, you have it all there, so you can get right to it, and you don't have to fumble around with trying to find it in the dark, poor lighting, in a hurry. Now, after you're done making your fix at the racetrack, if you need to slap it in the other way, use a nail, use a rivet, stem, whatever you need to do, you know, in the heat of the battle, you know, that's fine. But I feel like here, if you needed to, you could easily bend it up, and gravity's helping you can pull it out, pound it down. You know, that's just my little additional piece of advice for when you're doing wheel bearings. And like I said, these will eventually seat in and they will get freed up, and once you add the wheel to it, get that inertia from the wheel. That'll help. So just a short little video tonight, just showing us getting back into the swing of things. It is July 30th. We have fallen behind severely this year. between trying to find a different car, having to fix my wife's personal car, trying to sell my other car, buying a four-wheeler and tinkering on that. The weather hasn't helped. We've had a bunch of snow since November. I think we got snow back in November. So just the pain and hassle of that, moving trailers around, moving cars around. Had initially planned on selling my old car as a roller. Didn't really get much bites on it, and we just determined to, as a team, we were going to take all the components from that car and put it on this one to save some money and time, instead of trying to find stuff, buy stuff, that kind of stuff. So we got told this was ready and available. We brought it into the garage. We had pushed the roller into the enclosed trailer, and unfortunately it's very hard to get the parts off the roller when it's in a box. So we ended up finding a way to get it out of the box, take the parts off, put it in the trailer, and then the frame from the old car, which we'll be posting here shortly, will be going, is on the open trailer outside in the snow, which is tarped. So, but we just don't have enough room between the spare stuff and the workbench and the welder and kid stuff and sheet metal brake, and yeah, we just don't have enough room in here. So hopefully look forward to getting some sheet metal here soon, and we'll start on probably the cockpit first. That's going to be fun. I don't know if you can hear that excitement in my voice, but I'm not looking forward to it. We did get some parts today, so we got some stuff there, so we can get new brakes routed for the bodies on it. Probably the front suspension after this. We just, some little pilly stuff, like we need some new caliper pins, and we replaced the spindle arm on this side, but the bolts were kind of bent up, so I got to pick up some new bolts there. Rear end sitting over there. We just got to go through bearings, same thing like we did in the front. New bearings, new seals. I got to check the inner seals out, so that should be ready to drop in. We don't have to worry about jigging that. If it fit in the old car, it'll fit in this one for brackets and that stuff. So that'll be pretty quick once we get that. And then this thing could be set on the ground on wheels. Motor's over there. My other motor, just got a call yesterday that my new motor's done. I think that's about all I can fill you in for now. I know it's been a while since I posted a video, and I just want to say thank you to everyone that watches, subscribes to my videos. All right, ranted long enough. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you at the next time.